It's the first public demonstration of the world's most sophisticated passenger jet.
Okay, you're at 100 feet there.
100.
The Airbus A320 is being introduced to the world.
Mesdames et messieurs, votre attention s'il vous plaît. L'Airbus A320 arrive.
That introduction turns into a fatal calamity.
30. Can't be. 30.
It could not possibly have come at a worse time for Airbus. The crash was a major embarrassment.
There's enormous pressure on investigators. If Airbus is to survive, they must find the answer to one crucial question.
Was it the pilot or was it the plane?
It's 2:30 in the afternoon on June the 26th, 1988. An unusual charter flight prepares to depart Basel-Mulhouse Airport in France, near the Swiss border.
Anti-ice.
Captain Michel Aceline is one of Air France's most distinguished pilots.
On.
Though only 44, he's the head of pilot training for the company's newest plane, the Airbus A320. It's only the third of its kind to roll off the assembly line. Captain Aceline flew this very aircraft from the factory in Toulouse just 2 days earlier.
I was in charge of the launching of the 320 in Air France. The company used me to promote the aircraft. The speeches to make was constantly on the television, on newspaper.
Airshow 296 would like to roll, please.
Aceline's first officer, Pierre Maier, is also a senior Air France pilot.
Airshow 296.
He's invited 2 off-duty flight attendants to come along for the ride on this special flight. The aircraft is booked to perform a low-altitude flyover at a local airshow. There are 130 people on board this A320, which is unusual for an airshow demonstration flight. They have no luggage. For some, it's their first time on an airplane. There are even children, like 7-year-old Mariama Bari, unaccompanied by their parents. After the flyover, they will be taken on a sightseeing tour around Mont Blanc, the highest peak in Western Europe. Most got their tickets as promotional gifts from a local bank and newspaper. Jean-Marie Schreiber is a young reporter covering the launch of the new plane.
As a journalist, I was thrilled to be on the flight, to have a chance to see how people reacted inside the plane.
Another journalist aboard, Jean-Claude Boche, has been busy recording the event.
As I got on the plane, I thought, great, this is going to be an unforgettable experience. And it really was unforgettable.
The A320 is the first civil aircraft to use fly-by-wire, a cutting-edge technology that computerizes flight controls. The system had previously mainly been used by the military.
On the fly-by-wire system, the pilot essentially flies the computer, and the computer flies the aircraft.
Fly-by-wire alters the relationship between pilot and plane. It gives computers the ability to override human inputs to prevent pilot error. The A320's flight computer won't let its human operators do anything it determines to be dangerous. Airbus has become the first civil aircraft maker to embrace this technology. It hopes this will give it an edge over its longtime American rival, Boeing. In its first public presentation, Airbus has a lot on the line.
Okay, tell me what you want in terms of speed and altitude.
Okay then, takeoff light turn, We go nice and easy to find out things.
We tried to demonstrate the capability of this aircraft. To say we wanted to show off, not exactly. We wanted to make a good job, and we were sure to make a good job.
Once we identify the airfield, we extend flaps to 3. We'll do the flyover at 100, landing gear out, and you just leave it up to me. I'll give it alpha max. Done it 20 times.
Okay.
Captain Aceline is planning a breathtaking maneuver. A low-altitude, nose-high flyby at alpha max. This is the slowest a plane can fly without stalling.
Ladies and gentlemen, hello and welcome aboard this Airbus A320, which was put into service just 2 days ago. We will soon be taking off for a short sightseeing flight, which will start from the Habsheim Flying Club, and then we'll be flying around Mont Blanc. I wish you a very pleasant flight. That's done.
ACF 296Q, clear for takeoff. Runway 16.
We're rolling.
Take off. Go.
Parameters normal. 100.
100.
It's already requesting climb. You see that?
Yes, that happens. I know the bug.
V1. Rotate. Gear up, flaps 1. After takeoff checklist completed.
It's only a 5-minute flight to Habsheim Airfield, where the airshow is being held. For this sleepy Alsatian town, the airshow is the highlight of the summer.
The airshow drew more than 5,000 people. There was significant interest from the public.
The airfield is so small, its coordinates aren't stored in the plane's navigation database, so the pilots must find it by sight.
You're at 8 nautical miles. You'll soon see it. There's the highway.
We leave the highway to the left, don't we? No, to the right of the highway.
It's slightly to the right of the highway.
There's the airfield. You've got it, have you?
The pilots have spotted the airfield late. They will have to hurry to descend to the planned altitude for the flyover at the airshow. A crowd is forming at the runway.
Air Charter 296, good afternoon.
Habsheim, hello. We're coming into view of the airfield for the flyover.
Yes, I can see you. We're cleared. The sky's clear.
Gear down.
Okay, we're going in for low altitude, low speed flyover. 296.
Roger.
Flaps 2.
Quebec November Hotel, Absane, Fox Echo 984.
Okay. 984. Put in 984. Flaps 3.
Flaps 3.
That's the airfield. You confirm?
Affirmative.
Flight 296 makes a gentle turn to line up with the runway. The pilots must now lose more altitude and speed to get into position for the flyover.
200. 200.
Mesdames et messieurs, votre attention s'il vous plaît. L'Airbus A320 arrive.
Okay, you're at 100 feet there.
100.
Watch it.
100.
Watch it.
The aircraft is now at the planned altitude. For Aceline, this will be the most delicate part of the maneuver. He must keep the plane in a stable position with the nose up, but not too high.
I looked at the ground and said, look, he's not high enough, because you could see the grass right out your window.
Okay. I'm okay there. Disconnect auto throttle.
He disables one of the plane's safety features so that the computer won't speed up the slow-moving plane. Only now, Captain Aceline sees a danger that threatens the lives of everyone on board. The A320's low-speed flyover at the Habsheim airfield is suddenly not going according to plan. There's a forest in the path of Captain Aceline's plane.
30.
Pick up, go run power.
He selects the highest thrust setting and pulls back on the controls, expecting the aircraft to pull up. But the plane keeps dropping.
Can't be.
J'ai commencé à voir par le hublot des branches d'arbres.
I started to see through the window tree branches. I was astonished. You can imagine being on a trail in a large vehicle, a bumpy trail, driving at 80 or 100 kilometers an hour, and you're shaking from all sides. It was like that. I was saying to myself, the plane has to stay in one piece, because if the plane stays whole, we'll be okay. If it breaks up, we're done for.
S'il casse, c'est fichu.
Still full of fuel, the right wing of the jet is sheared off. The fuel ignites immediately on impact.
We stopped very quickly. And on the ground, I broke my seat, just because I was holding very firmly. I broke my seat, and I could see a lot of flames all over. But about 20 meters high flames around the cockpit, smoke coming from everywhere.
The first officer is badly injured.
And he has a lot of blood. And even with the full harness, he hit something in front of him.
What the hell have you done?
I don't know. I don't understand.
There was a moment of silence when the plane finally stopped.
Incredibly, the fuselage is still in one piece. Everyone has survived the impact, but they're not out of danger yet.
Alors là, je me penche.
So I lean to the right, and I see red flames. The windows were red. And I think, we held together, but we're going to burn to death.
Mais on va mourir brûlé.
Then we heard somebody say, "Get out, there's a fire."
Sortez, sortez, il y a le feu.
Evacuate the aircraft. Hurry, I'll deal with him.
Only 2 exits can be used for evacuation. The rest are engulfed in flames. But thick branches block one of the doors, making evacuation difficult. In the chaos of the cabin, some passengers struggle with their seatbelts. Marie-Françoise Froche is one of the last passengers to leave her seat. She comes across Mariama Barry, who's trapped in her seat.
Mariama
Barry, she was 7, 8. After the accident, people pushing toward the exit pushed on the backs of the seats, the backs that folded over her, and then she was trapped by her seatbelt. No one saw her. She was forgotten.
On l'a pas vue, on l'a oubliée.
But it's too late. Both are overcome by smoke before they can get off the plane. In the cockpit, Captain Aceline struggles to get his injured first officer out of the burning aircraft.
I took him from his seat and belt him, carried, I don't know how, and I put it in a slide. When the passenger, all of them, the last one, was out of the plane, I saw my crew. They told me, Captain, they are all out. I couldn't believe it.
But the crew is wrong. Not all the passengers have made it out. Marie-Françoise Froche, Mariama Barry, and another young boy are dead. In addition to the tragic loss of life, the accident is a PR disaster for Airbus.
The crash could not possibly have come at a worse time for Airbus. They were trying out this new concept, which they had touted very widely as a new level of safety for civil flight. And here's a pilot going and crashing one. For those who actually saw the accident, and it was broadcast on the news media throughout the world the same evening that it happened, there was amazement. The crash was a major embarrassment.
Investigators from France's Accident Investigation Bureau are on the scene of the crash within hours. They need to know why this demonstration flight ended in disaster. They recover the plane's data and voice recorders. Claude Béchet will head the investigation.
Was it the pilot or was it the plane? We need to know.
Like the pilots of Flight 296, he also works for Air France as an airline captain.
Let's get to work.
Which is unusual for a state investigator.
At that time, I was still an airline pilot, and I was in New York when the accident happened, and they sent me a telegram to ask me to come back to Paris as soon as possible.
Apart from the flight recorders, investigators have a remarkable piece of evidence to consider. A high-quality video of the accident has been recorded by a French cameraman.
It was the first time we had a video of an accident, you know. Normally, an accident happens in the middle of nowhere. Nobody is there with a camera to film it.
The tape clearly shows the plane flying right at the trees at the end of the runway. It doesn't seem to be climbing at all. The cockpit voice recorder offers a confounding clue.
Take off, go around power.
30. 30.
Get me!
It's clear the crew had no idea there was an obstacle at the end of the runway. Investigators are puzzled. How could a forest take a pilot by surprise? Béchet brings Captain Aceline in for questioning about the flyover at Habsheim. They need to know what his plan was.
My intention was to carry out a flyover at slow speed.
As a qualified A320 pilot, Claude Béchet is familiar with the plane's capabilities.
Over the airstrip and we go to Alpha Max.
Very good.
He sees nothing wrong with Captain Asseline's plan.
It was not bad. Making a slow pass was well planned. And he seemed to me to be very open and very ready to help to work with the investigation commission.
Investigators turn their attention to how Air France prepared the flight crew for the airshow. They discover a memo setting out the rules for all airshow flights. What draws the attention of investigators is the minimum altitude Air France had selected for airshow flyovers: 100 feet. It was in violation of national regulations.
He should have been at 500 feet, as a matter of fact. But they had at that time a tendency for pilots who were making air shows like that to go a little bit lower and sometimes much lower.
Chief Investigator Claude Béchet now wonders if there were any other mistakes in the planning of the flight. He soon learns that Air France's flight division didn't start drawing up a flight plan for the demonstration until less than 48 hours before the airshow. An Air France employee had prepared maps of the airfield for the crew of Flight 296. Investigators find a serious problem. The forest around Habsheim Airfield did not show up on the photocopies. The employee who had put together the flight package didn't have an opportunity to discuss it with the crew.
You were using a navigation chart?
While questioning Aceline, Béchet discovers that the pilots were also given little time to prepare.
Happened then. Here's the flight package. Thanks.
That's highly unusual for an air show.
My co-pilot told me, okay, we make a flight around Mont Blanc, and then we have to make 2 low pass over a small airport, Habsheim. Told me there is nothing special. So for me, it was a normal flight, a normal day.
That preparation had not been complete, and there had been no briefing of the crew by the staff.
Investigators then make an intriguing discovery at the crash site. They measure the height of the trees hit by Flight 296. They discover the average height of the forest to be only 40 feet. This poses an urgent question. How could an Airbus that was supposed to be flying at 100 feet hit trees less than half that height? It is clear to investigators that Flight 296 fatally deviated from its original flight plan, losing altitude before plunging into a forest. But only the black box data can help them understand how and why this had happened. Information from the A320's flight data recorder is recovered within hours of the crash. The device records information about 200 aircraft functions. It paints a detailed picture of how Flight 296 was operating in the final minutes of its journey.
Can be!
We could reconstruct the entire accident. We could live with the crew as the accident was happening.
Investigators make 2 striking observations from the data. The first is that Flight 296 suffered no mechanical breakdowns. The second is that the A320 followed a very different flight path than the one Captain Aceline had planned. Instead of maintaining a stable airspeed and altitude, Flight 296 had slowed down and lost altitude as it performed the flyover. As the A320 crossed the Habsheim airfield, its speed dropped to only 112 knots. That's about as slow as an A320 can fly. The plane's deceleration was so dramatic, it was even visible on the video. Michel Aceline was one of Air France's top pilots. Claude Béchet is hard-pressed to understand how he could have mishandled such a high-profile flight. Pressed further, Aceline explains how the trouble started.
You were using a navigation chart?
Yes, we had some difficulty locating the airfield. Leave the highway to the left, don't we? No, to the right of the highway.
It's slightly to the right of the highway.
There's the airfield. You've got it, have you?
They spotted the airfield too late. So when they did, they reduced the power and they descended.
So they rushed their descent in order to get into position for the flyover.
And they were still slowing down when they reached the airfield.
That's the airfield. You confirm?
Affirmative.
But then another problem emerged. The spectators were lined up on a different runway from the one the crew was heading for. The crew of Air France Flight 296 is ill-prepared for their demonstration flight. In planning for the air show, Air France only provided the crew with information for runway 2, Habsheim's only paved airstrip. But Captain Aceline sees the crowds aligned on a much shorter, adjacent grass field.
I was expecting a normal runway. At the latest moment, I saw that it was a grass runway.
Captain Aceline lined up with the grass strip.
I had no idea that at the end of the runway was a forest. For me, it was bushes only or something.
Okay, you're at 100 feet there. Watch it. Watch it.
Because they had to rush their descent, by the time Flight 296 got to the airfield, it was flying too fast. To lose speed, Captain Aceline kept the thrust on its lowest power setting, well below the setting pilots normally use for Alpha Max flight. But another serious problem was developing. The aircraft had dropped below 100 feet and was continuing to fall. And the crew didn't seem to notice.
I'm okay there. Disconnect auto throttle.
In a matter of seconds, the altitude had fallen to only 30 feet.
What was extremely clear is that airplane was flying at approximately 30 feet above the ground. Regardless of any other data, this data was extremely important.
Take off, go around power.
No airplane of that size or of any other size should make a flight path that low.
The data is clear. You were at 30 feet, not 100.
I believed I was at 100 feet.
Claude Béchet is still uncertain how the A320 ended up so dangerously close to the ground. Captain Aceline insists his instruments failed him.
Flaps 2.
Quebec November Hotel Absine, Fox Echo 984.
Okay. 984.
Captain Aceline was relying on his barometric altimeter. It uses air pressure to measure the plane's distance from the ground. It had to be set to local atmospheric pressure to be accurate.
Quebec November Hotel Absine, Fox Echo 984.
Okay. 984. Put in 9.
The cockpit recorder proves that the tower provided the pressure reading and the crew set their instrument. But Aceline insists the altimeter was giving him a false reading.
I tell you, the altimeter said the plane was at 100 feet.
Michel Aceline stated that the barometric altimeter was, in fact, to be precise, 67 feet out. And that is something that he claims led him to be flying at 30 feet instead of at 100 feet.
Investigators are skeptical. Aceline had more than one instrument to give him altitude information. The A320 has a second altimeter that uses radio waves to calculate the plane's distance from the ground. That altimeter displays the altitude on a digital display. But Captain Aceline claims it was difficult to read.
We could not use the radio altimeter because this radio altimeter is digital and nobody can fly by reading numbers. I tried that later on a simulator. I never succeed to do it.
But the radio altimeter has another way of alerting pilots.
I'm okay there.
50.
A digital voice call-out.
Disconnect auto throttle.
But Aceline claims he and his first officer, Pierre Maier, could not hear it.
Some people say, but you could have heard the radio altimeter saying 30, 30, 50, 40, 30. No, because at that time this aircraft was very, very noisy. And we have the headset. And we have demonstrated at that time that the radio altimeter warnings or the radio altimeter call-outs, they were not going through the headset.
50.
Despite Aceline's defense, investigators are certain that the crew of Flight 296 mishandled a risky maneuver. Béchet has more questions for Captain Aceline.
What did you do when you saw the trees?
I did what any pilot would do. I tried to climb over them.
Investigators learn that in the final moments before the crash,
30. Take off, go around power.
Captain Aceline applied full throttle.
When I was waiting for the engine to spool up, then I realized in front of me there were trees. And I was waiting.
But he claims the engines did not respond. And when they finally kicked in, it was too late.
I tell you, the engines did not come on when I gave it full throttle.
Captain Aceline's testimony raises a troubling prospect. If there was a prolonged delay in engine response, it could indicate a critical problem with the A320's turbojets. Captain Aceline is convinced the engines didn't respond quickly enough in the final seconds of the flight. He makes it his mission to prove it. He uncovers an Airbus document warning of a defect on the A320. It says the plane's engine speed could stagnate at low altitude, a condition caused by poor airflow. When this occurs, the engine cannot accelerate. But investigators can find no evidence of such a failure in any of the data from the plane.
Take off, go run power.
In the 5 seconds after Captain Aceline applied full power on the thrust levers, the A320's twin engines had begun to spool up. They reached 84% thrust, close to full power, just before the plane hit the trees.
When you put from idle to full power, you have the impression that nothing happens for a few seconds, and then the power comes. That was normal, exactly as predicted by the certification.
Investigators are increasingly certain the engines on Flight 296 didn't fail. They find a novel way to verify the data. Video of the crash picked up the distinctive sound of the A320's engines accelerating. By studying that sound, engineers can determine how much power the engines were generating in the final seconds before the crash.
We were able to compare the RPM of the engines from that film and from the flight data recorder. There was nothing wrong with the engines, any of the two engines.
Why?
Chief Investigator Claude Béchet has a new headache. Captain Aceline is convinced there is a conspiracy against him. He cuts off all cooperation with the investigation.
Very well.
Investigation committee, I tried to cooperate with them, but I began to be suspicious. And the press, each week, the aircraft is good, the aircraft has nothing, pilot error, pilot error, pilot error. All that was a big, big, big cover-up, my opinion.
Captain Aceline begins a campaign to challenge the French investigation. He appears on British television to make a dramatic assertion.
When I pull the stick to up position, the flight controls, the elevator control go to down position. So on any aircraft, if you ask up, following the order of the pilots, the elevator control goes to up. And not that on that one, it went to down. Why? That would be the good question.
His accusations go to the heart of doubts about the aircraft. That Airbus fly-by-wire system had given the A320's computers too much control. Aceline's claim that the plane didn't follow his instructions is supported by data from the plane's flight recorder. The black box recorded every movement of the pilot's side stick controller. It does show that seconds before the crash, Captain Aceline pulled it back to get the plane's nose up. Investigators compare it with what the plane did in response. They make a perplexing discovery.
He's telling the truth. The elevator moved down.
In the final seconds before the accident, the pilots had desperately tried to pull up. The side stick controls the plane's elevator. Pulling back on it should raise the elevator and pitch the plane upwards.
30.
But that's not what happened on this flight.
One of the strange things about the crash flight, which became apparent when the digital flight recorder was analyzed, was that during the last few seconds prior to contact with the trees, the pilot was dragging back on the stick as hard as he could, but the flight surfaces were moving into a position to put the nose down.
Captain Aceline believes the plane's descent triggered an automatic response by the flight computers. Aceline inadvertently brought his plane to within 30 feet of the ground with his landing gear down and his flaps extended. Investigators now wonder if the plane's computer determined that Aceline was landing and initiated the necessary steps to accomplish that.
As the plane leveled up with the airfield, it overflew a little copse of trees, which took the radar altitude momentarily below 30 feet. That would have been sufficient to trigger the flight control system to enter landing mode.
It's possible that in spite of what Captain Aceline was commanding the plane to do, the computer brought the plane's nose down for landing. Investigators must try to determine whether the A320 overrode its pilot at a critical moment. They analyze the data from the flight recorder.
Stop it there.
But to their disappointment...
So was the plane in landing mode or not?
The flight data recorder can't confirm if the plane went into landing mode. The A320 systems are so advanced that the recorder can't track all of the plane's functions. Investigator Claude Béchet comes up with another way to find out. He replicates Aceline's approach to the Habsheim airfield to see how the A320 responds.
Okay, let's start the descent. Power to flight idle. Now put it into Alpha Max. That's it. Gently.
I replayed the accident, but on the longest runway in Toulouse.
Altitude, 40 feet, 35 feet.
We replayed the accident exactly what it was.
Béchet's plan is to descend to 30 feet, as Aceline's A320 did.
Now pull up slightly to level off. Hold it there.
Béchet wants to see if the flight computer puts the plane in landing mode.
Okay, now full thrust. Did you feel that? Alpha protection.
The test flight has triggered a nose-down response from the plane's computers, like the crash of Flight 296. But the plane hadn't gone into landing mode. Instead, the Flyover had activated one of the A320's main safety features: stall protection. Due to a lack of airflow over the wings, flying slowly in a nose-high position can cause a plane to lose lift. The A320's computer has been programmed to bring the plane's nose down when it gets close to stalling.
This means that, in theory, as long as the flight control system is in operation, the pilot cannot stall the plane.
Béchet concludes the flight computers did override Captain Aceline's command. But he believes that by doing so, it had prevented the plane from stalling and crashing just short of the tree line.
That airplane didn't stall and, let's say, landed on the trees.
The investigation into the crash at Habsheim is coming to an end. Claude Béchet prepares to deliver his verdict.
The conclusion of my report was that the airplane was too low, too slow, and with not enough power.
As far as Claude Béchet is concerned, the report is the final word on the Habsheim tragedy. The case, however, is far from over. The French justice system is moving towards a judgment of Captain Aceline. He is charged with involuntary homicide in the deaths of 3 passengers and faces the prospect of a long prison sentence. But Captain Aceline believes he has found evidence that will exonerate him. He is convinced there was a conspiracy to tamper with the plane's black boxes, to conceal problems with the A320's fly-by-wire technology.
There has been a cover-up with some funny recorders. That's the first point. The second point, They have been changing the content of the recordings.
It all begins, according to Aceline, at the crash site. An employee of France's Civil Aviation Authority is photographed carrying the A320's flight recorders from the scene. Those same black boxes are presented as evidence at Aceline's trial. But inexplicably, they look different.
I had a chance to see the black boxes held by the court. But when I see the state they're in, they're old boxes, full of scratches, dusty, with chipped paint. I think, wait, these can't be the boxes from the crash. The plane was new. They're not the right ones.
Captain Aceline hires a Swiss criminology institute to compare the two photographs. Its conclusion: they're not the same flight recorders. Captain Michel Aceline claims the black box data from his flight has been tampered with. But investigator Claude Béchet rejects the accusations as outrageous.
They were trying to prove that the tapes had been tampered with, which we could not understand because every recorder expert knew that it was physically impossible.
But there is one expert who believes the black boxes are suspicious. Ray Davis is a former head of flight recorder analysis at Britain's Air Accidents Investigation Branch. He has been hired by British television to review the French investigators' work.
It was a little bit of an eye-opener in a way, in that prior to reading the report, I had a totally different impression of the possible causes of this accident, whereas when I read the report, there were so many anomalies and questions raised by the report that my whole attitude towards the accident changed completely.
Davis discovers evidence that could vindicate Aceline. It raises questions about when the crew applied power to try to overfly the trees.
30.
Take off, go run power.
30.
While studying the black box data, Davis comes across a curious inconsistency. French investigators had synchronized the black boxes with a transcript of air traffic control communications. Davis examines the last conversation the pilots had with the tower before the crash.
984. Okay, 984. Put in 984.
It was recorded by both air traffic control and the plane's own black box.
Quebec November Hotel at same box Echo 984. Quebec November Hotel at same box Echo 984.
Ray Davis discovers a time discrepancy between the two recordings, amounting to a loss of several seconds. According to the black box data, the aircraft was 5 seconds from impact with the trees when Captain Aceline commanded full thrust from the engines. But according to Ray Davis's analysis, this actually took place 4 seconds earlier. This 4-second gap dramatically changes the calculus of the accident. It's the difference between a normal delay in engine response and a serious malfunction.
Aceline claims that on this particular occasion, the delay was more than he expected. And depending upon which side of the argument you come down at as to whether or not the 4-second delay in the digital flight data recording was real or not, then, you know, he's either an idiot or he's right.
The French justice system does not believe that Aceline is right. After multiple appeals, Michel Aceline is convicted of involuntary homicide and sentenced to 10 months in prison. Still, the controversy over the black boxes and the missing 4 seconds lingers on. It promises to forever cloud the results of Claude Béchet's investigation.
The public opinion thought probably, oh, well, there was so much at stake, you know. It was the future of all European aviation industry, which was at stake. So they managed to tamper the tapes so they could blame the pilot and not the airplane. But this is just impossible.
The investigation into the Habsheim accident made several recommendations. It calls for passengers to be banned on all demonstration flights. It also calls for better reconnaissance of airfields by flight crews. And they want airline procedures to be reviewed to ensure they conform with official regulations concerning altitude. Michel Aceline went on to a career as a teacher and inventor in the aviation industry. He continues to appeal his conviction and has devoted much of his life to clearing his name. The tragedy at Habsheim would have little impact on Airbus industry. The A320 would go on to become one of the most successful commercial aircraft in history, selling over 750 planes in its first 10 years. And fly-by-wire technology would be safely adopted by a new generation of passenger aircraft.
75, good night now.
Sundance 518, taxi across runway 24 left, contact ground point 65 when off.
February the 1st, 1991. Los Angeles International Airport, LAX.
246 heading 270, contact Los Angeles departure. Thank you, USAir 1493. You're cleared to land 24 left.
Cleared to land, 24 left, 1493.
Traveling at 240 kilometers per hour, USAir Flight 1493 descends towards runway 24 left.
What the hell?
I pointed to the aircraft and yelled, USAir is crashing. The aircraft was fully engulfed in flames.
But the full scope of this tragedy is far greater than anyone can imagine.
Mayday, Mayday.
At one of the busiest airports in the world, a Boeing 737 has just exploded in flames upon landing.
I think the thought process in the tower was, it was 1991, it was one of the first nights of the first Gulf War. And I think the thing that was foremost in our mind was maybe it was a bomb that went off on the aircraft.
As firefighters bring the blaze under control, rescuers begin searching for survivors.
About 5 minutes after the incident occurred, we got a call from an emergency vehicle.
Amid the wreckage, they have made an alarming discovery. One that forces everyone involved to re-examine every detail of the last 15 minutes. USAir Flight 1493 cruises towards Los Angeles International Airport. LAX is a central hub for international travelers.
Just confirm the visual approach for USAir 1493 is 24 left.
That's correct, USAir 1493.
For the approach, Captain Colin Shaw is managing radio communications. First Officer David Kelly is at the controls. With 89 passengers on board, the flight isn't quite full.
Well, I'd been on a business trip to Columbus, Ohio. I went from the business meetings to Columbus Airport and got on a USAir flight that was nonstop to Los Angeles. I planned a lot of good things and good times for that weekend.
USAir 1493. Expedite your descent through 4000 as much as practical, if you would. There will be traffic pass above you on the south side.
As the Boeing 737 nears Los Angeles, the approach controller tells the pilots to make a quick descent. They will need to stay clear of a flight passing above them.
Okay, I'll expedite through 4. USAir 1493.
Landing at LAX can be a challenge for pilots. The airspace around the airport is often thick with traffic. On average, a plane arrives or departs every 50 seconds. Each of its 4 runways handles both takeoffs and landings. Taxiways intersect the runways at dozens of locations. The airport can be a maze of stops and starts for pilots following instructions issued by controllers.
737, turn right 010, intercept 48.
You got the left side in sight?
Yeah.
We're out of 4.
USAir 1493. Thanks for your help. Contact Los Angeles Tower 133.9. Good night.
Good night.
Gear down?
All right. You gave 3 bells?
Yes, I did.
Perched 12 stories above the ground, tower controllers have a hawk's eye view of traffic coming and going from the airport.
It was a busy night. There was a lot of airplanes. We had numerous arrivals and departures during that time of the night, so it was a typical day.
Elliot Brann is the clearance delivery controller.
The primary duties of the clearance delivery controller is issuing the routes of flight and the flight plans to the pilots as they come out of the computer. A flight strip is printed out, so you get a piece of paper with the call sign, type aircraft, route of flight. I issue the clearance to the pilot, and then I pass the strips, the flight information, to the next controller.
Brann shares flight information with 4 other controllers. 2 ground controllers, who handle planes moving between the gates and the runways, and 2 local controllers, who are responsible for planes taking off and landing. Tonight, local controller Robin Washer is overseeing the 2 north runways at LAX, 24 left and 24 right. She uses the flight strips to keep track of flights departing and arriving.
USAir 23 taxiing to position and hold runway 24 left.
Position and hold 24 left. USAir 23.
246, you still holding short of 47?
46, affirmative.
All right, you're next. SkyWest 569, taxi up and hold short at runway 24 left.
Roger, hold short.
$28.75. Good night now.
USAir Flight 1493 is about 13 kilometers from LAX. The pilots configure their plane for landing.
Speed brakes. Still working for a living.
All right. Flaps are going 1.
Flaps.
Now the pilots radio the LAX tower for landing instructions.
USAir 1493, inside rolling.
Wings 5006. Ground, tower.
Robin Washer is busy with other planes. She doesn't respond to their radio call.
SkyWest 569, taxi to position, hold runway 24 left. Traffic will cross downfield.
Okay, 24 left. Position and hold. SkyWest 569.
Wings west 5006, tower.
At 2166, connect approach 124.5.
30, green light,
to 10. Gear, flaps, landing clearance remains.
Just 6 kilometers from the airport, the USAir jet still doesn't have the okay to land.
Sundance 518, taxi across runway 24 left, contact ground 0.65 when you're off the runway. Good night.
Captain Shaw contacts the tower for the second time in less than a minute. He needs Washer's permission to land.
USAir 1493 for the left side. 24 left.
246 heading 270, contact Los Angeles departure. Night.
But she's still focused on other planes.
Out of 1,000 feet.
Flight 1493 is now 1 minute from the runway. It's what pilots call short final.
Sometimes due to other priorities that take place, an aircraft might not get a landing clearance until short final.
Thank you, USAir 1493. You're cleared to land. 24 left.
Cleared to land, 24 left, 1493. Looks real good. You're coming out of 500. What the hell?
The USAir 737 has barely touched down. It erupts in flames and crashes through Los Angeles International Airport.
I saw USAir touch down, and as he got about third way down the runway at taxiway 45, the aircraft was fully engulfed in flames. The supervisor ran past me to pick up the crash phone and alert the emergency vehicles to respond.
Aboard the flight, sheer terror.
There was a tremendous crunching sensation, and there was this extraordinary shower of sparks that shot by my window.
Good God.
Rosa Reynoso is a plainclothes officer with the airport police.
We see the aircraft engulfed in fire. My partner and I were probably about 500 yards from it.
Alert 33, runway 24 out. Affirmative, alert 33.
The initial moments were very scary, very chaotic. I remember just thinking to myself, oh God, please get some more people out here. Get me fire, get me officers, get me somebody, because this is not good.
In the tower, there's no time to dwell on what's happened. Other aircraft are still coming in to land. Controllers must direct them to safety.
Wings left 5212, winds 240 at 8. You are cleared to land. Runway 24 right. Use caution. We just had an aircraft go off the runway in flames.
The cabin of Flight 1493 is filling with toxic smoke. Some passengers rush to a door at the rear of the plane.
I probably got 7 or 8 rows down the aisle, and then I encountered a cluster of passengers standing in the aisle, not moving. I thought to myself, there must be an opening in the front of the plane that allowed for this tremendous quantity of smoke to roll into the plane so quickly. And so I stumbled forward to the cockpit area, and there was tremendous fire on both sides of the plane. I said to myself, my gosh, there's no way you're going to get out of this airplane, David. You're trapped.
Outside, some have escaped the plane. Rosa Reynoso is the first emergency responder to arrive at the scene.
The fire was intense. It was very, very hot. I mean, almost singeing us.
She needs to act fast to help passengers away from the burning wreckage.
The passengers were trying to escape the plane from the emergency exit doors. However, the fire had engulfed the doors, so some of the people that were fine jumped out of the plane and into the fire.
More emergency personnel arrive within minutes.
Most passengers are jumping out of that door.
Some people were on fire. Some of them were scratched, cut up. Some of them had broken legs. It was pretty traumatic. And I think you just start operating on knowing that you have to do the right thing and try and save these people.
David Koch is still inside.
I suddenly saw a crack of light, and my God, it was a miracle. The crack opened up, and I suddenly realized that I had opened the galley door.
But now he faces another hurdle. He can't even see the ground through the fire and smoke.
And I said to myself, what the hell, and jumped out. I landed on the ground and then started crawling on my hands and knees away from the airplane. I had a great sense of guilt. Why did I not go back into the airplane and say, follow me? And I think if I'd gone back into the cabin, I might have passed out and fallen on the floor and died. And that's how I've come to terms with the fact that I got out but didn't help anybody else out.
As the search for survivors continues, firefighters make a stunning find.
This is Rescue 1. We've got a propeller down here in the wreckage.
The discovery of a propeller has horrifying implications.
There's 2 planes down here.
As soon as we found out that information, we started actively looking to see what aircraft, if any, were missing. So we started looking at the flight strips that were already departed, and then we looked at the ones that were still pending. And then we called the departure control, radar controller, to find out which ones they've talked to in the last 5-6 minutes.
What about SkyWest 5569?
No, we haven't heard from them.
SkyWest 569, taxiing to position hold, runway 24 left.
Okay, 24 left, position.
And hold, SkyWest 569.
Staff can account for all of the aircraft except for SkyWest 5569, a Fairchild Metroliner bound for Palmdale, California. Emergency personnel find parts of the smaller plane strewn across runway 24 left. There were 12 people on board the flight. None have survived. What's left of their plane is crushed between USAir 1493 and an abandoned building near the runway.
My first thought was, oh my God, there was someone else under there, and we didn't even realize it.
There's even more loss of life on board the larger plane. 20 are dead, 2 others are mortally wounded. First Officer Kelly has survived, but Captain Shaw has not. The disaster thrusts LAX into the media spotlight.
America's runways, according to the nation's pilots, the most dangerous part of the flight.
In the months and years leading up to the crash, increasing traffic was becoming a safety concern at Los Angeles International Airport.
The most close calls, Los Angeles International Airport. 33 near collisions over the last 4 years. That's one every month and a half.
The accident confirms safety issues need to be addressed. The National Transportation Safety Board sends its GO team to LAX to investigate.
It was kind of a horrific scene. The front end of the airplane was impaled on the captain's side against the building. And with close inspection, we could see parts of another aircraft underneath.
Investigators can see that the two planes collided at an intersection on runway 24 left.
The scenario of the accident resulted in two planes being on the runway at the same time. The runway was occupied, and that's something that should never happen when a landing clearance is granted.
Reducing collisions on U.S. runways is a priority for investigators from the NTSB.
We had runway incursions on the most wanted list from 1990 here at the Safety Board, and it's a major concern for the whole industry. A runway incursion is simply when an inappropriate object is out on a runway that's going to be used for a takeoff or landing.
Some of the world's worst airline disasters have taken place on runways. In March 1977, on the island of Tenerife, 583 people died when two Boeing 747s collided on the runway. In January 1990, a Beechcraft King Air 100 was struck by a Boeing 727 attempting to land in Atlanta. Later that year in Detroit, another Boeing 727 smashed straight into a DC-9 carrying 44 people.
Runway incursions occur due to some failure in the existing system. Something has happened. Some directive has not been followed. Some inattention is present in the scenario of a runway incursion.
Which one of these planes was cleared for 24 left?
Investigators need to find out why there were two planes on runway 24 left at the same time.
One of the principal objectives was to immediately see if we could find out what error had taken place that would allow that situation to occur.
Part of that answer may lie in the wreckage. But 24 hours after the crash, the investigation is at a near standstill. There's too much fuel on board the 737. Crawling through the wreckage would be dangerous.
The aircraft had about 6,000 pounds, maybe 1,000 gallons of fuel on board.
How long is this going to take?
The Saturday was spent defueling the aircraft, and that's a very slow process. That took almost all day before the fire department could declare that the scene was safe.
With airplane parts littering the airport, LAX is running at half capacity. 2 of the 4 runways are shut down. That's causing chaos for travelers. When the NTSB team finally gets access to the wreckage, they're under enormous pressure to act quickly. They must gather all the information they need so the airport can be fully reopened. Their investigation has a dual purpose. They must figure out what caused the collision. They also want to know why so many passengers got trapped and died in the burning aircraft.
We're not sure what went on. We don't have a recording of it, but there were some altercations with people trying to get ahead of other people.
Making matters worse, one of the emergency exit doors is inside the plane, partially blocking the exit.
If you follow the instructions on the card, the exit card, it will tell you to throw that exit out. This did not take place, so the right over-the-wing exit was, I would say, partially obstructed by that large hatch.
The NTSB concludes that a reduced number of exit doors made it impossible for many of the passengers to escape. With no way out, they were overcome by toxic smoke as it filled the cabin. While some investigators analyze wreckage at the crash site, others focus on air traffic control.
Well, first and foremost, we look at the communications, then we also look at the procedures within the facility and how those are applied, and were they indeed followed.
To learn more, the NTSB collects the audio tapes of the controller's communications with the planes. Investigators wonder what instructions were given to the pilots in the moments leading up to the crash. They also want to know what the flight crews were saying during those crucial seconds. Did the pilots follow their instructions? The cockpit voice recorders should provide investigators with the answer. But then Bob McIntosh gets some bad news about the SkyWest Metroliner.
No voice recorder. Great.
We recognized, looking at the onboard equipment, that SkyWest 569 did not have a CVR flight recorder installed. And that was disappointing to us.
At the time of the crash, commuter planes were not required to carry cockpit voice recorders. This means the only SkyWest conversations caught on tape are radio communications recorded in the control tower.
Okay, 24 left, position and hold, SkyWest 569.
The two cockpit crew members would have exchanged words, would have been listening to the air traffic information that was coming into their cockpit all the time, and we recognized that that was a valuable piece of data that we lost.
Using the air traffic control tapes and just one CVR, investigators try to find out which of the two aircraft in the collision was actually cleared to use runway 24 left. The answer will raise alarming questions about the safety of all passengers flying to and from LAX.
246, are you still holding short of 47?
The investigation into the deadly collision on runway 24 left focuses on Robin Washer's conversations with the two planes involved. Investigators begin with the smaller plane.
23, taxi into position and hold.
Minutes before the accident, the pilots of the Metroliner waited for permission to take off.
SkyWest 569, taxi into position and hold runway 24 left. Traffic will be crossing downfield.
We use the tapes to try to visualize, like a local controller would, where the aircraft would be on the runway.
The pilots of the SkyWest Metroliner turned their plane onto the runway and stopped at intersection 45. They had to wait for another plane to cross the runway downfield.
Okay, 24 left, position and hold, SkyWest 569.
Okay, stop right there.
From the air traffic control tapes, the NTSB can tell that the pilots of the Metroliner followed all their instructions correctly.
All right, let's keep going.
Responsibility for the accident must lie elsewhere. Investigators probe the tapes further. They look at Washer's communications with the USAir pilots.
USAir 1493 for the left side, 24 left.
Thank you, USAir 1493. You're cleared to land 24 left.
a USAir 1493 was cleared to land on the same runway during the time that SkyWest 569 was still sitting in position on that same runway.
Cleared to land, 24 left, 1493.
SkyWest 569, right at intersection 45.
How long's it been there?
1 minute, 7 seconds.
The air traffic control tapes reveal that Robin Washer instructed both the SkyWest Metroliner and the USAir Flight to use runway 24 left at the same time.
Left contact, ground, 0.65 when you are.
What the hell?
When we're examining the recorded voice communications, what we try to do is to put ourselves in the position of the controller. What would she have seen? What would she have heard? What would she have done?
Investigators need to know what Robin Washer was doing at the time of the crash. They look at the other flights that she had under her control.
Wings West 5006, taxi across runway 24 left.
They learn that in the moments before the collision, Washer began to lose track of some of those flights.
Is that for Philippine 102?
No, sir, hold short. Wings West 5006, taxi across runway 24 left.
Wings West 5006 was an aircraft that was on the north side of runway 24 left who wanted to cross to the south side.
Wings West 5006, ground, tower.
And when she was ready to cross the aircraft, the crew did not respond.
Washer spent nearly a full minute of her time trying to re-establish radio contact with the flight crossing the runway.
Can I hear the rest of that exchange?
Wings West 5006, on frequency again. Change radio. Sorry about that.
They advised her they had inadvertently been on another frequency.
5006, you're back with me.
Yeah, we didn't mean to switch radios. We're on now.
And that created a distraction for the local controller.
Okay, I thought I lost you.
Sorry, we thought we lost you. We apologize.
Not a problem.
But investigators discover that that flight wasn't the only aircraft Robin Washer was fixated on in the moments before the crash.
Tower Wings West 5072 is ready for takeoff.
Wings West 5072?
With USAir 1493 less than a minute from touchdown, Washer hears from another Wings West aircraft, Flight 5072.
When Wings West 5072 called to say that he was ready for departure, it was obvious to us that she didn't understand who this aircraft was.
Wings West 5072, are you at 47 or full length?
We're at full length.
Okay, hold short.
Roger, holding short.
Investigators need to hear from Washer herself.
I couldn't find the flight progress strip.
They hope to learn why she didn't recognize a flight that was under her control.
I couldn't find the strip, so I asked my supervisor to help me. Francina? I need a strip for Wings West 5072.
She explains that as the pilots of the Metroliner waited on the runway for permission to take off, she was searching for another flight's progress strip. Before she could get back on track, USAir Flight 1493 crashed into the back of the Metroliner.
What the hell?
NTSB investigators now know that human error played a major role in the collision at LAX. Remarkably, when she cleared the USAir flight to land, Robin Washer simply forgot about the Metroliner waiting on the runway.
This situation that occurred is a situation that no controller wants to go through. You train your whole career for this not to happen. And when it does happen, it's, you can't even describe the feelings that you go through. A situation like this could potentially happen to anybody. We are all human.
After the accident, Washer left her job at LAX and never worked as an air traffic controller again. But investigators believe there are likely more causes to this accident than one person's fatal error.
Anytime that you do an investigation, it's easy to point the blame at one individual. What you want to do is to say, why did this occur, and what can we do to prevent a reoccurrence?
Answers to those questions begin to emerge as the NTSB examines the daily routine in the control tower in the weeks before the accident.
It was one of those, you don't know you have a problem until you have a problem.
It turns out another disaster was narrowly averted 7 months before the collision. A landing DC-10 flew just over an Airbus waiting on the runway to take off at LAX.
Los Angeles Airport has always been known as one of the #1 runway incursion airports in the system, and changes were overdue.
Controllers at LAX produced documentation showing that immediately after that close call, they alerted officials that the control tower was understaffed. They also explained that regions around the northern runways were invisible to controllers because their view was blocked by a light tower.
We went up in the tower, climbed the stairs, and asked the air traffic controllers to step aside while we sat in their chairs and looked out the window. The view that the air traffic controller was presented with had an obstruction, a light pole that produced a glare, and it was a light that lit up the airport ramp.
Robin Washer may not have been able to see the SkyWest Metroliner as it sat out on the runway. NTSB investigators look at other tools she could have used to detect the forgotten plane.
Surface radar is generally used during periods of low visibility. It is a tool by which the local controller, should they so choose, be able to visually confirm on that scope that an aircraft is indeed where it says it is.
Ground radar displays all aircraft and ground vehicles moving around the airport. But on the night of the accident, that system wasn't working.
You're holding short, is that correct, sir?
Yes, ma'am, we're holding short.
It was in constant out of service, in service, out of service, in service, and gave the management a lot of trouble.
The system was not very reliable, and we did lodge complaints to have it fixed and to upgrade the system as soon as we could.
Investigators learned that just 4 days before the accident, officials at LAX had formally asked the FAA to treat the failing ground radar with the highest priority.
The radar drive and some of the drive mechanism had some ring gears and spur gears that they had to go to machine shops and literally make that part because it would wear out on a regular basis trying to rotate the antenna.
We looked into this particular problem and learned that Los Angeles had been slated to receive a new system in 1988. However, that date had slipped, and at that time, they were not sure when they were going to get a new radar system.
With the ground radar system out of commission, and with her view of the runway impeded by blinding lights, Robin Washer's chances of discovering her error were slim. Investigators turned their attention to the cockpit of the USAir Flight. They wonder why the pilots didn't see the Metroliner out on the runway and abort their landing.
Well, most of us in the pilot community would recognize that it's our job to scan that runway and find aircraft that might be out there or anything else prior to landing.
Like all planes, the Metroliner is equipped with lights to make it more visible at night. There are strobe lights on the wingtips and the tail, navigation lights on the wings, and a colored anti-collision beacon on top of the vertical stabilizer.
We were concerned about the SkyWest lighting and had to look at the flight operations manual, and we found that the operating procedure for that company was to turn on the strobe lights only after clearance for takeoff.
So no other lights were required? Okay, thank you.
The Metroliner wasn't yet cleared for takeoff. So the only lights that would have been lit while it waited on the runway were the navigation lights on the wings and tail, and the anti-collision beacon on the tail. NTSB investigators then use a helicopter to put themselves in the position of the USAir pilots as they were making the approach to runway 24 left.
We went up and we actually flew that final approach in order to verify what we thought might be the condition of obscuration.
They positioned a Metroliner on the runway in the same spot where the collision occurred.
And sure enough, we could not see that aircraft parked out there at spot 45 and 47. You just couldn't see it.
Looks real good.
The investigation determines the lights on the Metroliner were the same color and brightness as the runway lights. The plane may have been all but invisible to the pilots of USAir 1493.
You're coming out of 500.
The anti-collision beacon in particular would have been lost in a sea of lights. When the National Transportation Safety Board releases its report, controller error is determined to be a cause of the runway collision.
We're in the business of determining why something happened. You may call it a cause or causes or contributing factors, but our job ends when the next accident is prevented.
Preventing accidents on the runways of LAX would prove to be a much greater challenge than investigators could imagine. The collision between USAir Flight 1493 and a SkyWest Metroliner alarms the public. The accident seems to prove that controllers cannot safely handle the increasing traffic at Los Angeles International Airport. The NTSB investigation points to Robin Washer's failure to maintain awareness of the flights under her control as one cause of the accident. But the report also points to a failing system in the air traffic control facilities at LAX. In the months and years following the accident, improvements are made to air traffic facilities in an attempt to make the airport a safer place. The failing ground radar system is finally replaced with a newer model.
Today at Los Angeles Tower, we have the newest system out there. Each arrival or departure they're taxiing on the taxiways or on the runways have a call sign and type aircraft associated with it, so you have positive identification of all aircraft at all times.
New policies governing the way flight progress strips are handled in the tower are put in place. Ground controllers now organize the strips before they make their way to the local controller. The extra set of eyes reduces the local controller's workload. 5 years after the crash, a new air traffic control tower is built at LAX. The tower is 16 stories higher, 3 times larger, and offers controllers clear, unobstructed sightlines. New regulations concerning aircraft lighting are also put in place. It becomes mandatory for pilots to turn on all their lights before they move out onto a runway. But despite the improvements, the rate of runway incursions at LAX only goes up.
Throughout the 90s and even into the 2000s, I would describe it as a common event. LAX certainly was one of the worst airports we had for a number of incursions.
10 years after the accident, more serious runway incursions were happening at LAX than at any other airport in the United States.
They had double-digit runway incursions and serious runway incursions almost every year. And in fact, in 2007, they actually had 21 runway incursions.
In an attempt to reduce the problem once and for all, the Federal Aviation Administration begins work on a new system of runway lights to keep planes apart on the ground.
Runway status light system is a series of runway entrance lighting that we put at taxiways or takeoff hold lighting that we actually put on the runway itself.
The system is fully automatic. It uses a series of red lights embedded in the runways and taxiways. The lights warn pilots if there is conflicting traffic.
The runway status lights illuminate red, tells a pilot that it is unsafe, or a vehicle driver, that it is unsafe to either cross or enter that runway. And it triggers because there is an aircraft landing or departing. There's some other traffic on the runway. The runway status light seems to be one of the most effective systems we have for preventing runway incursions, and certainly the serious runway incursions.
In April 2009, the technology was installed at Los Angeles International Airport. Prototypes of the system have also been installed at Dallas-Fort Worth and San Diego. By 2011, runway status lights will be a key feature at dozens of airports across the United States.
The equipment we're using at Los Angeles Tower today is much better than the equipment that we used back in 1991. It's been upgraded, it's much more reliable, and it gives the controllers the tools they need to make sure that the runways are clear and to keep the aircraft moving.
Though new technology can never guarantee 100% safety, the improvements at LAX have restored public confidence in the airport, even among those who survived Flight 1493.
I spent a couple of days in intensive care at a local hospital, and I had nightmares, by the way, following my release from the hospital for quite a number of days. But I'm doing fine now. I have no problem with getting on airplanes and flying, and I've got great confidence in the airline system.